Hello, everyone. As you know, I've done some couple of pods on emergency communications. So this one is going to be a ham radio one. I am Alpha Charlie 1 India X-ray. And getting people into the digital side of ham radio can be expensive. Now, that's not to say that ham radio itself isn't expensive. I mean, you've already laid out quite a bit of money on your rig to begin with. And to add digital to it, you would be looking at possibly putting a computer on it and an interface between your computer and the radio. I'm very lucky. I've got an IC7100 that I purchased years ago, which does 2 meter and 70 centimeter and HF. So I can use that with just a USB cable, which some other radios do allow at this point. If you've got a small HT, which I know some HTs also do HF on 5 watts, but we'll get to what 5 watts can do you in a minute. But doing that on HT, you're going to need to have a different type of connector, right? And that's going to require a sound card on what you're getting. So what I'm going to talk about here is very simple, and it's for the USB. If you go look up DigiPi and see what they've got and ask the community about your radio, I'm sure they can figure out a solution for you. Now, the latest ones, there's a little board, $30, that sits on top of a sound card board, which costs you about $90. So that'd be about another $120 on what I'm going to describe today. That then has a connector on it, but then you got to figure out the wiring between that connector and your radio. Pretty simple stuff, right, for doing something like that. And having a sound card there, that takes place of something like a WinLInk or one of those type devices, which can run you $100+. So DigiPi is a Raspberry Pi, uses Pi 0. And that's the base for it. Now, I made a couple modifications to it because they never tell you what to put it in. So the Pi 0 that I got, and I'll make sure that I get the parts list and things, posted to communitystrong.us when I put the blog post up in a couple of days about the information about this. But Pi 0 is a very small device, all right? It's smaller than a credit card. And the one thing I've always found with Raspberry Pis is they can get hot. I've got a 3, I've got I think a 4 as well, and they can get pretty hot. So there is a heat sink case that you can get for it, which it's an aluminum case, sits right on top of the Pi. It helps radiate that heat away because there's no fan or anything to it. So I have my Raspberry Pi, I've got my case, I've got a little screen. That's all you need, except for a micro SD card, and my radio is a USB. So I have a micro USB to a USB-A. So I can plug my radio, normal cable that I've got for the radio, which is one of those old weird USB cables. I can't remember what they call the end of it. It's got the square end to it. So it's an ancient type cable, but it works. And that plugs in with the USB-A into this little adapter to micro, and I'm done. Now, the setup for it is fairly straightforward. It gives you a menu when you initialize it. You're going to be hooking this thing up as a hotspot to your phone right off the rip. And the reason you're doing that is you need to give it your password. Now, if you've used other Raspberry Pis, especially something with Pi-Star, you're going to have to set that up into the micro SD card that you burn when you put it in, right? I use Raspberry Pi Imager for both that and for this project. So you get the software for DigiPi and you load it into Raspberry Pi Imager and burn it to your micro SD. Put it into this device, start it up. Now, you will have to have a power supply of some kind for the Raspberry Pi 0. It takes 5 watts, so it's a small little supply. I've actually got mine running off of a battery backup USB output. It works perfectly fine on that. But I also bought a regular power adapter to it, so I'm not chained to this particular setup. But you take your Pi and you put in this little aluminum case, which has a heat sink piece to it that pushes down on top, and it protects your Pi. Now, when you put the screen on it, the pins are available on the outside because that's this type of case. It's got all the pins in place. And you just slide it down on there. The only thing I would worry about, and it doesn't look like it'd be very easy for it to happen, would be the back of the screen touching the aluminum case, which, I'm looking at it, it would take quite a bit to do that. But if you're worried about that, you could always take some non-conductive material and attach it to the back of the screen. The screen's real small little guy. It's outside the case, but the case itself is self-contained. Now the Pi Zero I paid a little more because the Pi Zero I got already has the head pins soldered into place. So it was one less step for me to do. Again, I want this to be an easy to use and quick way for somebody to get into digital communications. When we're talking emergency communications, it's great that we have the ability to talk over the radio or to do CW over the radio. But some of these modes allow for things that are even harder to hear to go across. So we'll get into some of the modes that you can get on here. It's got WinLInk. And again, WinLInk, I haven't tried point-to-point or peer-to-peer, but it goes out to a gateway just fine, and you can send information back and forth over the gateway. So as long as there's a gateway available, and in a disaster, so far we haven't had a nationwide disaster. I have a gateway in Maine that I can hit from here, and I've got a gateway in Virginia that I can hit from here without any trouble at all. I've got another couple of gateways, one's in New Hampshire, and I can't remember the other location, but I can send information back and forth. I run into a problem when it gets to a certain size. I'm using AirDrop to go across. So it's been working. You don't have VARA HF for use on these. I have it on my laptop computer. But again, trying to go for a lower cost of entry here. So you've got your Raspberry Pi, and like I said, everything cost me about $90 with the power supply and everything else. You get a JS8 call, which is an FT8 type of chat that you can use. You get FT8, you get Whisper. Now, the reason I wanted to bring up the modes here is, remember I talked about you can get an HF handheld 5 watts that you could hook up to an outside antenna, which obviously you would need to do. But I've gotten thousands of miles distance using Whisper. Now, Whisper is at 5 watts. Whisper is a very low key type of thing. It's not something you would use in emergency communications. But if you can hit several thousand miles on Whisper, which can hear things that are below the noise floor for a human ear to hear, that's pretty good. And you can get some traffic using just a 5 watt HF handheld, if that's the lowest point of entry that you can get into this with. It also has all the APRS stuff on it. You can do APRS chat on here if you want to. You can send an APRS message through a gateway. Again, this isn't something that's to you that you're going to be. You're going to be going out to a gateway to send this, but it can send a text message to a phone, and it can receive a text message from a phone. Again, where you are, your mileage may vary, but you got FLDigi on here. All right, so FLDigi doesn't need to have a gateway. FT8 doesn't need to have a gateway. JS8 doesn't need to have a gateway. These are protocols of one place to another. So you can send messages back and forth from one place to another. And as I've said before, if you're talking about sending information, right? So let's say you've got a list of things that a shelter needs, and it's going to a warehouse. And you've got, I need a dozen blankets. I need 3 cots. I need 4 bottles of isopropyl alcohol. I need a roll of gauze bandage. I need to have a coffee pot. Whatever it is, as you run down that list, you are not only taking up the time on the channel from everybody else, right? Assuming that the warehouse isn't on its own channel, but you're taking up the channel for the warehouse, even if it is there. So if the warehouse that you're getting it from has its own channel and you flip over to that channel and you're talking to the warehouse, every second that you're reading that off is a time that somebody else can't get to the warehouse. If you can put it in a digital mode. Now, I've seen a lot of people do FLDigi and they type, and quite honestly, that kind of drives me crazy. I hate watching the characters just come up and then get erased and people type things wrong. Throw a frigging notepad up and just drop it in a notepad and go and shoot the thing across, and you're copy paste and out the door it goes. But you can get that list and you can make up that list right on your tablet. Again, DigiPi doesn't have its own computer. It is its own computer, but it doesn't have a screen or anything you can work with. You're going to be attaching to it over the Wi-Fi. So you fire up your tablet, get this thing attached to whatever Wi-Fi it needs to, or attached directly to the device. Type in everything that you need to send out as your list. Copy, paste that into something like FLDigi or into WinLInk, and hit the button, and out it goes. So when the channel's clear and you send that information, or when the place that you're sending it to, like the warehouse says, we're looking for any, the next person to send, and you hit that send, it will be a lot quicker and take up a lot less time on that channel than talking to them will. So that's the importance in emergency communications of the digital modes, and that's being able to send information, a large amount of information, in a quick pattern, in a quick time. Now, if it's WinLInk and you're going out to a gateway, right, the advantage of going to a gateway is the gateway is going to hold that information. So the warehouse can go get the information, work on what it needs to. In the meantime, their system can keep cycling out to go get more information that it can then grab and you can use to do the next round of order. But again, you've got a system that's keeping the information for you, which is a huge benefit, assuming that their gateways are outside of the area and you can reliably get to them. But again, when you send it to a gateway, you can go to any gateway and get the information. It's not specific to the one you sent it to. So if I send something to Whiskey Delta 1 Oscar, all right, I can go to Kilo November 4, I think it's Lima, Quebec, November, and I can go get it from that site. So I don't have to be hitting the exact same spot that it was sent to. It's going into an interconnected system. If the interconnected systems aren't available, then you can drop down to peer-to-peer. Again, a faster transport, and you'd probably be doing this in a 2-part fashion. And the reason, what I mean by that is, so you could be listening over UHF, and the warehouse says, okay, I'm ready for you to send your information. I'm ready for the Red Cross to send their requirements. You would then go to the HF, hit the button to send, and it would send directly to them. Again, FLDigi has FL message. WinLInk has its own messaging system, which I prefer, but the information just gets passed across and out the wire it goes to the place it needs to go to. And again, if you're doing peer-to-peer, it's just your location to their location. You could be using HF, you could be using VHF, you could be using UHF, depending on how close you are to the warehouse's location, whichever mode's going to work best for you. And a lot of these will work on different modes. I mean, if your radio is available to give you all modes, it'll work all modes. If you've just got an HF radio for some reason, you can just use the HF side of it, 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter, a 40, 80, and send things out that way. Typically, I use the 80 meters on my WinLInk setup because I don't have a lot around me that I can send to. There's a couple of WinLInk spots that are in the VHF range, but they're outside the range that I can hit them from my house. So again, $90 for the DigiPi, and looking at the audio card one, which I don't need, looks like about another $130. So you're talking less than $300 for a device. But like I said, it doesn't have its own computer. Well, you don't need to go get a computer. You can get a tablet. You can run it on your phone if you want to. All it needs to have is that connection to the device. Now, I haven't tested out if you can use the device without it being connected to a router. But again, even if that's the case, all you need is an inexpensive router that you can bring along with you, connect your phone to the router, connect this to the router, and you're good to go. But I know it has its own hotspot, and it will default to a hotspot. So if that's the case, you might be able to get to it directly and just do your stuff directly from your tablet to the radio without having to have any other intervening equipment like a router to send the information back and forth. But it's been a really good device to play with at this point. I've gotten gotten some experience with it. I got some experience troubleshooting it with a couple of issues that I did because I didn't pay attention to the fact that when you do that initial setup, you're pretty much set to go for a lot of these things, and started playing around with the configurations, especially in the WinLInk, and kind of shot myself in the foot there. But they've done a great job of putting that initial screen in place so that you can go ahead and get everything set up there and just send it out the door. You're all set up. You're ready to go. You just need to go find your spots that you want to send to, and you're into digital communications for less than, worst case scenario, less than $300. So that's what I got for you guys this week. I will talk to you all next week.